Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day today. Today I want to talk about the economy and how it affects you, the job markets and all that kind of stuff there. But essentially, I think news had just come in stating that the UK economy is declining. What does that even mean? It means as a country, we're not as productive. It means as a country, there are not necessarily enough jobs going around to individuals in order to allow the economy to grow. And this current government has pledged that, or at least believes that, growth will come through ensuring that people are working. Makes sense. But how they define that is being revealed as the months and years go by. And that seems that it's heavily based on the state, reliance on the state, as opposed to growth through entrepreneurship and ensuring that there are businesses that thrive within the UK. Now, of course, when I talk about entrepreneurship and businesses, I'm not just talking about the startup or somebody's trying to start a business and making all this money, X, Y, and Z. The reality is that even if those startups did exist and they become successful, those individuals are basically providing jobs for those people within the UK. Again, with the caveat that the conditions, the policies, the taxes, the regulations are conducive to them wanting to, again, provide roles for people within the UK as opposed to finding people offshore or abroad or whatever it may be. Now, inherently, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does mean that we don't keep the money in our pockets. It means that the money is being offshooted elsewhere, which means there is not necessarily the structure or infrastructure or system to make it likable or attractive for business owners, startups, people wanting to do their own thing, actually set up effectively within the UK. And this is why last year there were so many millionaires that left, almost 11,000. So with that in mind, there are certain things that we need to state. So back in, and I'm looking at some figures here, back in November 2024, there were 32,000 job losses, and in December there were 47,000. Again, you can check all of these numbers on the Office for National Statistics and other places as well. There are different articles that talk about this stuff as well. And there have been a lot of people on payroll that have had jobs disappear. Okay. Now, this is even worse than what we saw in 2020 and 2021 when the pandemic was really high. Now, again, there is a question of, is this actually affecting individuals? And the answer is a solid yes. Of course it is. It doesn't talk to, however, people within the entrepreneurship, self-employment, contracting or consulting market. Maybe partly in terms of the contracting market, in terms of inside of IR35. But again, I'll probably have to do some interrogation in terms of those figures and stuff. But a point being made, for the general populace, we know this already, no shit Sherlock, it's getting harder to find jobs. But this makes it difficult because the policies that are being implemented and embedded make it difficult. So you've increased minimum wage, which sounds like a good thing, sounds like a really good thing. Don't get me wrong. This is me not showing opinion necessarily. I'm just highlighting stuff to you so you can make your own sort of thoughts around it, to £12.21, I believe. National insurance contributions for employees has gone from 13.8% to 15% from 5th/6th of April this year. And a whole bunch of other stuff that have been included in some of these changes. I say this to say that it makes it less attractive and harder for these organizations to want to hire. Now, it's not that they don't want to hire necessarily, because there are certain things that they want to do. But think of it like this. If your expenses are becoming increased, okay, they're becoming more difficult, you have less of a willingness to want to bring on staff, although you need staff. So you're in this tight position. Now, unless you do something very innovative, which we'll talk about in a second, or something where huge demand is created, etc., then it's going to be very difficult for you to actually either run to stand still or reach the business goals that you're trying to achieve. Okay? So this is why hiring is slowing down, it's becoming more difficult, and all of these different things there. And of course, when we're thinking about the recruitment pool, there was a documentary I was watching on this the other day. a lot of people are using AI. And in some ways, I encourage the use of AI. But using AI alone without using your brain and given the human nuances is not enough. And so what recruiters are seeing is a whole bunch of the same. They're seeing the whole bunch of the same. And so there's probably even a reluctance to review certain CVs if they are doing it, of course, and the hiring managers are doing it, because some people are still old school. Of course, there are other individuals and or organizations or recruitment companies that are using AI to do this review. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. But the point being made is a lot of it is the same. Or a lot of people aren't doing the basics effectively well, which means that people are automatically just being thrown in a bin, even if they do have the skills, the competencies, or the experience. So there's been a change of behavior in terms of what recruiters are finding and how they sort of like process those different CVs, supporting statements, etc., etc. And this is why I advocate speaking to recruiters where you can. But of course, they feel overwhelmed because a lot of people are trying to do these strategies as well. So you've got that aspect. And of course, when I came back to the whole innovation sort of like side of things, there's AI. Now, forget the minister's name who's kind of running the AI innovation thing for the UK. But the reality is AI is coming for all of us. I know everyone's been trying to be optimistic about it over the past couple of months or year. But even when we first saw ChatGPT, okay, and there was a couple of versions up before it became more popular, up until the point we're at now, where we're getting more into the agentic space, okay, where generative AI or general AI is linking in with robotics and, you know, all of these different things, it's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer that AI is the silent job killer for many individuals. And of course, there's a World Economic Forum report that you can check out if you go onto their website, which talks about, you know, I think it's what their outlook for jobs in the next 5 years or so. And, you know, the everyday sort of like job in terms of plumbing and electrician and all of those different crafts are less effective compared to those individuals who are doing office jobs. I think they're called white collar jobs. So, you know, admin roles, certain support roles, facilitative roles, etc., etc. Leadership is still a big thing. Project management is still a big thing. Of course, you're getting into the whole infrastructure and AI piece, which is becoming more of a thing. So these are all different things that are not protected, but still with the times and still with the trends in terms of need. But there will be some way that AI will work out how to replace this, especially with these agentic tools. Agentic is just a fancy term for saying AI plus automation, because they have agency, so to speak. And so if you can get the AI to do the thinking and then the integration from one system to another to, you know, facilitate that, then you've got something that's quite powerful. Okay, you got something quite powerful. And so there's a lot of contention in terms of how it's going to replace things within the legal sector, within the finance sector, within the management consulting sector, within healthcare. I mean, it spans everything. It spans everything. So there's thinking about all of that stuff as well. Now, of course, the other thing to mention is that the government has heavily been focusing on healthcare over the last couple of years, as well as some aspects of education and some aspects of other things as well. But other areas are under-resourced heavily. Again, you can look at I think it was the autumn budget, and you can look at the different areas that were budgeted before in terms of what was in Rachel Reeves' sort of like roadmap and plan. And you can look at the previous Conservative government to see what they were resourcing. Of course, as we saw in the last couple of days, NHS England has been axed, and there's 2 years before it gets subsumed into the Department of Health and Social Care, which for many sounds like a great thing. But of course, there are also these other 20 odd different quangos, I guess, support agencies, departments that are popping up to support the Labour government, so to speak. I say this all to say that money is being squeezed into the public sector, but it's not being reflected in roles. It's not being reflected in roles. And it's almost like, will it ever be reflected in roles? Is it going to get less productive? Now, of course, there are sort of like peaks and troughs when it comes to seasons. The winter seasons are quite difficult at times when it comes to finding roles X, Y, and Z, depending on different parts of the seasons. Then of course, from the winter to spring season, it picks up again, and then summer, no one's in. Autumn, some people are not in at the beginning, and then it kind of picks up again, and then it drops off. So there are different seasons, but it'll be interesting to see what the seasons look like, relatively speaking, now and previous years, specifically the pandemic years and pre-pandemic years as well, because the pandemic was the most difficult time for many people in terms of mental health, work, etc., etc. So there are some comparisons that can be done. There's a lot to be said. Now, of course, when we're thinking about sort of like inflation and interest rates and all of that stuff there, again, you can check the Bank of England for this, and I'll probably just do this just to make sure. But my understanding is that the interest rates are currently, I want to say 3%. Yes, the current inflation rate is 3%. Okay. Oh, let me just check and remove this, blah, blah, blah. Yes, so current inflation rate, 3%, target 2%. And the current bank rate is 4.5%. And the next sort of like potential change may be in the next couple of days, so next 5 days or so. Why is the inflation rate important? Well, it says something about how things are becoming more expensive versus people actually paying for stuff or purchasing stuff. And so that's where inflation comes from. And of course, there were the smart people who said, actually, do you know what? 2% is a good rate to keep inflation at. And so the Bank of England, which is a central bank, aims to ensure that happens by, I guess you could argue, manipulating economic activity. And that is through interest rates. And so interest rates come into play, and you'll know this through sort of like your loans or credit cards or mortgages. They are an additional amount of money on top when it comes to affording certain things like credit and stuff. And the reason why interest rates may increase is to stop people from spending necessarily. Okay, it's to stop people from spending. It's to slow it down a little bit. Okay, so that's the idea. But of course, interest rates are also good for savers. Okay, so there's a yin and yang effect that occurs depending on what side of the coin you're at. Why am I saying this stuff? Well, depending on what happens with inflation and economic activity and stuff determines what's happening within the job market, the economic market, and sort of like productivity as well. And even though we've done well to bring it down, considering everything that's happening, things are not improving within the UK. Now, what does the rest of the world look like? Well, the US isn't too dissimilar to what we're seeing in the UK, and the rest of Europe is apparently doing worse than us. But where you're seeing great growth is within places like Asia and Africa. Okay, nobody will say this, but that is the case. Now, you've got populations here that are aging like rapidly, okay, and there are more people sort of like living longer. And in places like Asia and Africa, you've got a booming young population thriving at the moment. So there is opportunity there, but some may argue there is a lack of infrastructure and governance within those areas, hence why they're deemed as risky, and hence why there are so many different organizations trying to get involved within these spaces. Why am I saying all this stuff? This is all coming to a specific point. The point I'm trying to make is that when it comes to understanding this stuff, what does it specifically mean for you? And for you, it may look like 3 potential options. You continue doing what you're doing, okay? That could look like burying your head in the sand or thriving in what you're doing right now. Number 2, you find options and opportunities to learn and grow based on where the market trends are. So clearly there's a need and growth within the sort of like technology space. There's always going to be a need within the finance space. There is a need within the energy space. There is a need within the healthcare space. These are clear needs within the UK and probably in other areas as well, but these are clear needs. You can always see what areas are neglected and what areas are being sort of funded based on these different ONS reports or plans from the budgets that are announced every 6 months or so. The third thing you could do is look elsewhere. Look outside of the UK. Now, of course, the grass isn't always greener, but it may be depending on the sort of niche expertise that you have. And so with that in mind, that's thinking about what opportunities exist in those other areas. What does their infrastructure and system look like? Does it support what you're looking to do? Does it support entrepreneurship, or does it support sort of like, the labor force, etc., etc.? So you kind of have to have an idea of what you're looking for, and then study and research this stuff, not just by looking at stuff online, but speaking to different people if you can. Maybe it's contacting recruiters within those spaces, and you can do that by going onto LinkedIn, filtering it by the country, and then finding the details of the recruiter based on a job that's advertised and contacting those individuals via email or phone. There are different ways in which you can do it, but the point being made is you kind of have to decide what you want to do. Now, of course, if you choose the first option, then you don't really need to watch this video. It's just for interest. If you choose the second option, this is where it comes into the whole portfolio career aspect. This comes into understanding what market trends there are within the UK. And this also means that you have to be proactive in your approach, because there are a lot of shifting sands that are happening at the moment. If it's the latter option, in terms of looking elsewhere, it's the same as number two, but looking at it in different countries and stuff. But you just have to be clear about what you're looking to do. And then you start your plan in terms of upskilling. For some people, it may be difficult because funding is difficult for you. So maybe you have to do more sort of like unstructured learning. For others, you may be able to afford certain courses or vocational studies or whatever it may be to position yourself as initially a knowledge expert and then eventually a practitioner as well, because it's deciding whether this is a transfer of skills or not. So again, this was kind of like a semi-structured video, but I basically wanted to highlight the outlook that we have currently at the moment. And of course, I'm not going to have all of the detailed information and stuff. I say this to just bring it to your awareness, at least if you don't know it already. And then you can make a decision whether you want to go deeper into watching other videos or going to the sources like the Office of National Statistics data or other sort of articles that talk about this stuff at a bit more succinctly and with a bit more sort of like backed information and sources. Of course, data is only as good as what is entered in and the process used to enter in that information. But yeah, it is what it is. I think the final thing I want to say is that when it comes to consultancies, and my friends shared this with me the other day on LinkedIn, we're finding that with the really big ones, there is a breakdown in terms of partnership, should we say. So partners are leaving big consultancy firms, going out to start their own ones. So it's not that there isn't work for these consultancies. It's more that actually the model, the partnership model is changing, okay? Which means that there is a change in terms of how consultancy is done. And that big shift, that big sort of acceleration, I believe at least, has come down to how technology is being implemented into our infrastructure right now, namely AI. So these individuals are finding ways to create their own ChatGPT. These people are getting all the IP, okay, from these different places, IP being intellectual property, and sort of like developing their own frameworks and setups. I remember when I first started using ChatGPT 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember how long it was. It did everything for me. Everything. And it's been a great co-partner, co-lead in terms of brainstorming stuff. And so with that in mind, if you're in a partner position, okay, from a consultancy standpoint, you could be dangerous. You could be very dangerous. So you may set up your own stuff. And so niche knowledge and acquired knowledge becomes power within this economy, especially with technology. But this again just shows signs of the fact that AI is the silent job killer, so to speak. It won't be funny in a couple of decades time, but we'll see what happens. Of course, anything could happen. So let me know your thoughts. I'd love to know your thoughts on all of these topics and stuff. Again, I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert within this space. I'm semi-interested in it. But I just want to raise awareness for some people who may not be aware of some of this stuff. And of course, I'm raising awareness for myself, should I say, in terms of attempting to learn more about it. And me sharing this is my attempt. This is not me saying I know it all. This is my attempt to try and consolidate what I think I know. So if you want to see more videos centered around this stuff, portfolio careers, the outlook within the UK, all that kind of jazz, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.